Shalom, Hebrew students, and I hope you're having a great Sunday afternoon. Yep, it's 2:30. So I've been thinking about doing a new kind of video, and we're going to play with it for a couple weeks and see if it's helpful to all of you. But I've noticed that one of the disadvantages of doing this language learning online is that there is some connective tissue between weeks that often gets overlooked. This would normally be dealt with in the classroom if there's sort of spontaneous questions and Q&A type sessions, but because we're in an online setting and because we can't have quite as much dynamic back and forth, I felt like there was a kind of communication that we were overlooking or that we haven't been able to get simply because it's online. And the idea is that we're now between weeks 3 and now moving into weeks 4. We're going to be covering 4 total chapters, right? 5 and 6 was last week, was week 3, and then 7 and 8 is this coming week. And there's some connective tissue there between the two that I think we should just talk about. And this is also related to just trends that I'm seeing in our tutoring sessions, and also trends that I'm seeing in your homework and on the quizzes. And I felt like with just a short little video, I might be able to address some of this just this lack of connectivity, connective tissue that I'm feeling when we're transitioning from week to week. So let's see if it works out, and you all can just give me feedback and let me know if I'm just in fact just on a wild goose chase and chasing ghosts, or if there is actually some value for you in this kind of video. So basically, what I want to do is talk about some of the challenges I think some of you all are having in last week's material, how that's going to relate to this coming week, and then also address some additional study strategies that I think will be helpful for you in learning this material. So here's the first thing. I can't emphasize enough how much you all need to be reinforcing your vocabulary. This is not the kind of class where you sort of learn it one week and can then forget it the next. The learning is cumulative. And so at all times, you need to be studying the entirety of your vocabulary. This has become more important since chapter 4, where you actually had vocab lists, right? And you need to be studying the whole body of the vocabulary that we're going to be working with, because every quiz is to a certain degree a cumulative quiz, right? Because the sentences will draw on vocabulary that you've learned earlier. So all of that's really important. So that's the first point, is that it's really important that vocab gets nailed hard. Those of you who did not do very well on the quiz, it is largely because you were unable to recognize the vocabulary. Now, vocab is only going to get more difficult for a couple reasons. One is that there are going to be more words, right? So that just makes it harder to remember it all. The second part, though, and you've already noticed this with things like the conjunction, the vav, with the prepositions, and with the definite article. Those are 3 recently new kind of grammatical things that you've learned. How do you say the? How do you say things like in, with, on, under, that kind of stuff? And then how do you say and? The way the Hebrew does this, in most cases, not in all, in most cases, is that they will attach those things to the words in the form of prepositions, or in the form of simply fragments that are attached to the front of, for instance, a noun. This makes it increasingly difficult for you as the reader, because you have to look at a word and you have to be thinking not just, do I know that word, but also what is attached to that word that I need to kind of strip away so that I can first come up with even a definition, right? And so that's one of the first skills that you have to learn as a Hebrew reader, is that you have to be able to look at words and determine what is part of the root and what has been added on. You think about it in the way, if any of you have done archaeology or even paleontology, something like that, you often have to kind of brush things away or remove dirt in order to see what you're looking at, right? Not a perfect analogy, but I think you get the idea. That's a way of thinking about language that we don't necessarily have to do much in English, and not necessarily in all languages, but Hebrew tends to place how best to put this, to add elements to words as a way of conveying different sorts of meanings. And so that's an important skill that you're going to continually need. We are only at the beginning of that. Okay, so, and the same is true also of the verbs that you're learning, right? So we've learned really just the third person form of the verb. We've learned how to say, for instance, he guarded shamar, but then we've also learned how to say she guarded shamra. And we even see it here already with shamra, that shamra has that extra hey at the end of it, right? They're reconfiguring the word, or they're adding things onto the word in order to provide it with a different kind of meaning. And so you just have to get used to that. That's going to be a normal part of Hebrew reading from here on out. I apologize if there's a bit of background noise there. Doing some construction next to our house. So that's the first thing, is that keep drilling that vocabulary. And because the more quickly you're able to recognize those 3-letter roots, right? They're often 3-letter roots. The more quickly you'll be able to tell, oh, that stuff on the front is extra, or it's not extra, but it's doing something different, right? This is the root. It means the land. It means land, and then the hey in the front means the. The quicker you can sort of learn to recognize those roots, the more quickly you'll be able to remove what has been extra and then sort of piece it all together. So that's the first thing that I noticed. Just those of you who struggled with the quiz, it was a vocab issue. Keep drilling that vocabulary. While you're drilling it, speak the words out loud. I noticed multiple times this week. Let me take a quick drink. I noticed multiple times this week in the tutoring sessions that you'd come across a word and you'd look at it and you would say, and many of you would get stuck and you say, I don't really recognize that word. And then I would say, well, we'll go ahead and try and pronounce it. You would pronounce it, and then you would say, oh, I recognize what that is, right? And so that's part of the reason why I emphasize so much the verbal reading. It's not because you all are, like they would do in a synagogue, right? You're not going to all be standing up and reading the Torah in front of congregations in Hebrew. You're not going to be doing that. It's a memorization. It's a mnemonic sort of reinforcement. It's a way of helping your brain remember what you are reading. And so that's why I emphasize so much the, reading out loud. Some of you have taken advantage of the Audible version of our textbook, and I do commend that to some of you. I don't require it of everybody because not everybody has has a device that can support Audible. But for those of you who think it might be useful to hear somebody basically read the book and the exercises out loud, then I encourage you maybe to look into that. I think it's relatively inexpensive, well under $20. And so my point there, though, is that continue to work on your reading, your pronunciation, learning how to... Oh, you're good. Yeah, thanks. Sorry, we just had somebody over here doing some measurement. Continue to work on recognizing those vocab words and on your pronunciation especially. If you find that you're still kind of halting in your pronunciation, if it takes you a while to kind of put the consonants together with the vowels, then I encourage you to go back to the first couple chapters, especially where they had those sentences where they transliterate English words into Hebrew, meaning they'll say things like Coca-Cola, pizza, beer, whatever it is. All these English words. Go back and keep working on those, because the reason those are useful is because you have immediate feedback, right? It's built into your brain because you know English already, and so you'll know how to say Coca-Cola. You'll know if you're pronouncing it correctly, and so then you don't have to sort of check in with somebody else. You'll automatically know whether you said something correctly or incorrectly. So if you're still at the point where you're kind of, it's taking you a while to get to pronounce the Hebrew words, go back and study those. It's really important that you're able to read in this class in a fluid, I didn't say fluent, in a fluid manner. I would say that if you are still struggling, kind of tripping over consonants and vowels by the end of this week, then you are really in trouble. And I highly urge, if you're in that situation where you are not able to read the Hebrew words with some fluidity without kind of tripping over what the sound would be in your own mind, then you need to let me know, and we can get you some help, because that is really a serious issue if you're not able to kind of just master the reading part of it, right? Not necessarily the translation, but just master being able to read and recognize what the different sounds make. And that's part of the reason why in the tutoring sessions, why we have you read out loud, because it gives us feedback as a teaching team how well or how poorly you're doing. Here's the third and final point that I want to make, I think. Let me just think quick here and make sure I didn't forget anything. No, I think. Oh no, I do have one other point. Okay, so since we're in the middle of verbs, you will begin to recognize in these next couple chapters that it's far more. We're learning far more than just the third person, right? In the Bible, there is a lot of like he did this, she did this, but there are also cases where we're talking in the second person, right? You, or the first person, I, and so we're gonna have to learn how to say those things. And what you're gonna notice is that in the perfect, which is what we're learning, we call it the perfect aspect, or sometimes called the perfect tense. Basically, generally refers to completed action. The way that they inflect those verbs differently is by adding different kinds of vowels and different kinds of endings to the verbs. Spend a lot of time working on those endings because they're going to come up throughout Hebrew. Or another way of putting it is there are some patterns that you will begin to notice in the different endings that will translate across different grammatical features. It's a little bit difficult to explain right now because you don't know those yet, but what I'm really trying to urge you to do is to spend a lot of time learning those verbal endings. It will pay off big time and really soon as well. So don't try to learn those endings just so you can pass the quiz. Try to learn them for mastery and try to learn them for instant recognition. That's really kind of the standard you're going for. Is if you can look at a verb and immediately know, okay, even if I don't know that root, I know it's a second person, masculine singular, something like that. Or you may look at the verb and say, well, again, I don't know what the root means, but based on the ending, it's a first person common singular, meaning I did something, right? That's the kind of level of memorization that you'll need to achieve in this week, especially when you're starting to learn about those endings. So I think that's it. I think that's all I need to say. Again, the purpose of this video is to kind of serve as a bridge between the lectures, because you had a lecture last week. We had a lot of learning and practice in between, and this video gives you a little bit of kind of class-wide feedback, stuff that I'm seeing, stuff that the TA is seeing. As he and I both work with you, it's stuff that we're seeing that we think we need to highlight to make your learning a little bit easier. So, all right, give me feedback on these videos over the next few weeks if you think they're helpful or not. I'm going to try and keep them to 10 minutes. This one was 12. That's basically within what I want to go for. I don't want to waste tons of your time. I just want this to be highly valuable for you and hopefully kind of give you just an extra little boost in your language learning experience. So, okay, everyone, thanks.